Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy award-winning investigative journalists, Earthfiles reporter and editor Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Moulton Howe.
Nearly half a century ago, in 1970, British television debuted a science fiction series about an alien invasion of Earth called UFO. Earth was being invaded by aliens from a dying planet. The aliens could control human minds when they took over human bodies. A top-secret government agency called Shadow investigated, but it's an agency that no one knew existed because Shadow used amnesia drugs to erase the memories of its own shadow operatives. That was TV science fiction, but it was based on real-world military and intelligence programs to study and use mind control. For example, beginning in the early 1950s, the CIA explored how to erase memories and control human minds by using chemicals, drugs, sound, or other frequencies that can cause brain concussions and amnesia. That highly classified CIA project was called MK Ultra. The first two letters, MK, are CIA code for the agency's technical services staff. The word Ultra was used by World War II intelligence to designate the highest secrecy classification. The U.S. Navy researched a related subproject 54 MK Ultra. They used suboral infrasound frequency blasts to erase human memory for events before and during the infrasound. One reason that government intelligence agencies might want to erase memories could be to prevent potential whistleblowers from leaking highly classified information to the public and media. Tonight on Phenomenon Radio, we will hear from retired U.S. Marine Corporal and Army Sergeant Michael Gerloff about his remembering at age 18 that he stood in front of a Marine recruiter who asked Michael if he would like to join a, quote, covert space program, close quote. Michael also remembered that when he was 8 years old in the third grade in Missouri, his teacher gave him a special alphanumerical code test. They put a flashcard in front of him for a few seconds, and then another and another. At the end, Michael was asked to repeat back what he had seen, and he was accurate up to 16 digits. Then the teacher asked if he could name the flashcards backwards, which he could. Were secret government agents monitoring schools trying to find especially bright young minds? I have been told that in the 1950s to the 1970s, American intelligence agencies searched schools for young people who were mathematically gifted and who could pick up telepathic images and thoughts. The agencies allegedly needed lots of secret help to monitor and analyze the non-human telepathic intelligences that they encountered during World War II. Another person in the category of a gifted young student who caught the attention of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio is 59-year-old Joseph Buchmann. He has a PhD in telecommunications from Indiana University and an MBA in finance from Purdue University. Now a retired professor, Joe has had a lifelong interest in ETs and UFOs since 1974. That's when he won his high school science fair that had been sponsored in part by the United States Air Force. In 2013, Dr. Buchmann was a moderator for the citizen hearing on UFO disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. He is now the current chairman of the Libertarian Party in Utah and is currently the Libertarian candidate for Utah's 3rd Congressional District after former Representative Jason Chaffetz resigned. Joe Buchmann wants to see legislation that would protect government whistleblowers who have information about ETs, UFOs, and an alleged secret space program. After this short break, we'll begin with Joseph Buchmann's experience at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base after he won that U.S. Air Force-sponsored science fair, and then we'll hear the extraordinary events of Michael Gerloff, beginning in 3rd grade, and then later entering the Marines at age 18, and onward to this day.
With Vibes, Mind, Body, Spirit. The Vibes Tribe seeks to assist you in creating and maintaining an uplifting and balanced state of being in your personal space. Palo Santo is a mystical tree that grows on the coast of South America. Palo is loved by many for its energetic, cleansing, and healing properties and is also popularized for its heavenly presence in keeping your energy grounded and clear. Burning Palo provides an uplifting scent to raise your vibration and is also beneficial for relieving stress, anxiety, depression, and emotional pain. Palo Santo is also known for relieving symptoms of the common cold, headaches, and asthma. We offer Palo Santo in resin, powder, or by the stick. Go to onlinevibes.com for all of your vibration elevation needs and receive a free stick of Palo Santo with any online purchase over $25. Shop onlinevibes.com, that's onlinevibez.com, and get your vibes on today.
Hi, this is Matt Ray for My Pillow. Look, I'd forgotten what a good night's sleep was like. Then I got a hold of My Pillow. I used to wake up with neck and shoulder pain. I thought it was the new normal. But after one night of using My Pillow, my neck and shoulder pain is gone, and I'm sleeping comfortably through the night. My Pillow's patented interlocking fill conforms to your personal sleep needs. It's guaranteed not to go flat. It's washable, it's dryable, and it's made in the USA, not to mention the 10-year warranty. Try it risk-free with a 60-day money-back guarantee. What have you got to lose besides back pain and shoulder pain? Right now, America's First News has a great deal. Try it for yourself. Call now. You'll get 50% off a 4-pack. That's 2 premium pillows and 2 travel pillows. Call now. 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY, R-A-Y. That's 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY.
Now you have the inside contact for alternative talk radio. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
You're locked in to Phenomenon Radio Live exclusively on KGRAradio.com, and tonight's interview with our very special guests, Joe Buchmann and Michael Gerloff. To start tonight's interview, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Race. And Joseph Buchmann and Michael Gerloff, welcome to Phenomenon Radio. Joseph, I know that you have a Utah 3rd District congressional race that's a digital town hall that you've got to go to in about a half hour. So I am so grateful that you could be here at the beginning of this broadcast to share with listeners your own high school experience that got you to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I am so glad that you are meeting Michael Gerloff on air, because I remember, Joe, back in the early 1990s, that we were at a conference in Farmington, Aztec region, and we sat at dinner, and you told me about how when you were in high school, you won a science fair, and that the reward was a trip to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that when you learned that that's what was going to happen, you knew that the Air Force was one of the sponsors, and that the reward was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that could you start with how it all began to unfold?
A panel of impartial judges on behalf of the men and women of the aerospace team have selected your exhibit, The Best in the Area of Engineering. To commemorate your award, an Air Force officer or non-commissioned officer will come to your high school in a few days to present you the Certificate of Achievement. Furthermore, as a part of your award, you're entitled to an all-expenses-paid tour of the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. And then it goes on. And so I received this letter. I was a sophomore, I believe in 1974. I graduated from New Albany High School in 1976. And I was very active in scouting and have stayed active in scouting most of my adult life. But one of my friends at that time, who was a few years older than me, was a radio station engineer there in Louisville. And Midwest Electronics became one of the most sought-after engineers in the country for a while. I don't think he minds, a guy named Pete Boyce. And Pete said, well, hey, if you're going up to Wright-Pat, you got to ask to see the flying saucer that's in Hangar 18. Now, Linda, this was, I believe, before Stan Friedman had ever even heard the name of Jesse Marcel. And it was certainly before the first book on Roswell was published. But I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't know much about it at the time. But I said, well, sure, that sounds fun. I'd love to see the flying saucer in Hangar 18. And I have a vivid memory of these Air Force officers driving me in a white four-door sedan up the interstate between Louisville and Cincinnati. And, it was a big deal for me. The interstate highway system was pretty new. I hadn't been that far away from home, probably without my parents at that time. And we're driving along, and there's a military convoy, dark green deuce-and-a-half trucks and Jeeps, standard military equipment from the 1960s, early 70s. And they're running on up the interstate there doing something. And a civilian car pulled in the middle of this military convoy as we were, I guess, in the passing lane or somewhere to see that. And I have this vivid memory of the Air Force officer saying, that's illegal. And I said, what's illegal? Because I guess I was born a libertarian. And he said, it's illegal for a civilian car to get in the middle of a military convoy. And I said, well, if nobody knows about that law, you can't expect people to obey it. I've never since then seen that rule published in any driver's handbook or anything else I've had, but apparently it's illegal to get in the middle of a military convoy. And then I remember asking to see the flying saucer in Hangar 18. And I don't know why, but I have no memory of visiting Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that day. But what I have then is a very, very vivid memory of the trip home. And at one point, the driver of the car, the Air Force officer, says to me, do I turn here to get to your parents' house? And I said, yes, that's right. And he said, now don't say that's right. If you're giving directions, you should say that's correct. That's right could be confusing. Well, why do I have these two extraordinarily vivid memories of those events regarding that trip, and yet no memory of what happened at the base? Now, to be fair, I don't remember most of 1974. I couldn't tell you who my teachers were without really struggling to think about it, or, well, I met Reuben Scher for orchestra, I'm sure, but most of that I don't remember. And so I told this story years later at a scouting event. And, a lot of adults in scouting are active in the military. There's an overlap there. And a friend of mine who worked in Army intelligence said, I think you were chemically debriefed. And we all laughed. Thought he was just pulling my leg, which is what happens around a lot of campfires at a lot of camps. And he said, no, I'm serious. They did not have a sense of humor about flying saucers in 1974. And they would have wanted to know why you were asking about it. And one of the side effects of these drugs that can be given to cause you to drop all of your inhibitions around telling the truth is that you have a very, very vivid memory of just before the drug takes effect and a vivid memory of just after it wears off. Well, that kind of caught my attention, and I didn't think a whole lot about it until 1999 when my wife and our 4 children and I got an RV and we were touring the country for the second summer in a row. We're not LDS. We're not Mormons. So I wanted to get the kids out of Utah in the summers. I was a tenured college professor, so I had 3 months off. First year we went from Disneyland to the Statue of Liberty and back, and this was going to be a shorter trip down to the Grand Canyon and out to my parents in Indiana and back. And on the way, we stopped at Roswell. And I had the great blessing of touring that museum at a time when Walter Hott was still sitting in that front office signing copies of the Roswell record, and Glenn Dennis and I struck up a conversation. And he had a large RV and was looking to downsize. And ours is a 19-foot van conversion. Yes, we put 4 children in a van and hauled them around the United States 2 summers in a row. And Glenn came out to the parking lot and stood there and talked with my wife and our children and myself. He shared about who he described as Naomi Self, the nurse, about the phone call he received and all of that. But it was during the visit to that museum that I realized I had been asking about a flying saucer in Hangar 18 before the first book about Roswell was ever published. And I believe before Stan interviewed Jesse Marcel Sr.
Right.
Do you know the exact date of that, or the year even, Linda, when Stan went from that TV station studio over to Houma? I believe it's Houma, Louisiana.
I know that. I did A Strange Harvest on animal mutilations in 79, and it was broadcast in 80. And Stan and I believe, met at the MUFON Houston conference in July of 80.
Wow.
And we began talking about all kinds of things. And later on, when I became supervising producer and creator of what became the Sighting series on Fox, Stan and I worked together on trying to flesh out some of the best witnesses to body and craft. And at that point, his whole Corona book and everything that he had done, I do not believe that it had come out until around 79, 80, 81, somewhere in there. And that what you are describing is that it was your friend, it was your colleague who said, and ask about Hangar 18, who was a very talented engineer. And the implication is in 1974 that he knew something that you didn't realize how significant. You ask it in innocence, but the Wright-Patterson people would have taken it with great alarm and suspicion, and that you are describing textbook case that when memory erasure is used, induced chemically generally, people will have a very vivid memory right up to whenever the intake of the chemical was, and they will have a very vivid memory coming out of it. They will not remember anything in between. And it is those bookends in life with people who have been in either military or intel, who have the same frustration that you have about remembering, that Michael Gerloff is going to tell an extraordinary story, and that all of this, Joseph, comes down to the fact that MK Ultra may have been technically stopped with the Frank Church Committee in the early 70s. But so many people over the last several decades have said our government never stopped experimenting with mind-erasing drugs. So
yes,
you be one of those people because you talked about Hangar 18, which is real, and I have met a man who was in Hangar 18.
They after that 99 experience in Roswell, we drove from there back to Indiana, where my friend lives to this day. And I suppose he's between 5 and 10 years older than me. But, you know, when I was 14, he would have been maybe 22 or 3. He seemed like an adult. I was still a kid. He was also a private pilot. And so when I got back to Indiana in 99, I called up my friend and I said, you know, what the heck were you trying to do? Get me killed? I mean, why are you telling me at age 14 to go ask about a flying saucer in Hangar 18? Nobody was talking about that at that time. How did you know about that? And he said that the fellow who taught him to fly was deeply into the UFO issue and had taken my friend Pete to meetups of whatever group it was pre-MUFON at the University of Louisville, and that there was a group there that met and talked about UFOs. And within that group, it was somewhat common knowledge that there was a flying saucer up at Wright Pat. And I gather there were rumors of this in the 60s and 70s as well in that community. And so I took notes on this conversation with Pete. I was calling him from my dad's home just across town. And what Pete told me was that he and his friend had driven up to Dayton, Ohio in the late 60s. He wasn't sure exactly when, but not too long before my trip in 74. And that they had wandered around the base and tried to sneak in to restricted areas. Back then, security wasn't as rigorous as it is today. And that they had been chased away by whatever security officers were there. And then Pete said that for 6 months after that, any time he would meet this friend of his, there would be the stereotypical men in black, dark suits, sunglasses, black sedans, sitting at another table across a restaurant, in a parking lot, at the other end of the parking lot, following him around for 6 months. And I said, well, I'd like to meet your friend, your flight instructor. He was a CFII. And he said, well, Joe, it's the strangest thing. He died. And he was my closest friend. He died out in Colorado. And nobody called to tell me about the funeral until after several weeks, and it was all over. And I don't know why, but it was very strange. He had said that when he had been employed as a air traffic controller, looking at radar, or maybe it was a military aircraft control position, not commercial, that he had seen things flying around doing right-hand turns at 5,000 miles an hour in non-conventional ways, and was just absolutely convinced that there was non-human created technology flying in our skies. And then the last part of this story, before I have to go here in just a bit, is that in 1980, when I was about to graduate from Indiana University with that degree in telecom, which was really more radio and TV. It wasn't internet security or anything back then in the late 70s, early 80s. I had an overwhelming desire to apply at Sandia Labs. And I remember going to the library and looking up what on earth Sandia Labs was. I had a friend who had gone to work for Bell Laboratories. He was the valedictorian of my high school, still a good friend of mine, brilliant guy. And I just was wondering, why that gave me such an emotional twinge. So I was not recruited into whatever I may have touched the edges of. I didn't pursue a degree in the hard sciences. Maybe if I had, that would have made more sense. I also told you, and I say this publicly, part of the science fair project I cut some corners on. I had built a laser from a kit, a little red ruby laser. I have to be one of the first human beings, by the way, who discovered the connection between a ruby red laser and a cat. I would point that little dot on the floor of our home and up the walls, and the cat just went nuts. And now, of course, you can do that with an equivalent laser that's smaller than a chapstick box container. But I had made some holograms, and I had tried to make my own hologram, and in the end they just came out blurry. And so I used a commercial one with chess pieces that I had that were identical, and I left people with the impression that I had made that hologram. So if they debriefed me, they probably found out that I had done that. And I wonder how close I came to being fully pulled into that world. But I do wonder if I touched the edges of it. And I remember our dinner in Aztec, Linda, like it was yesterday. And I remember you're telling me I should go find Leo Sprinkle or someone else and see if I could recover any memories from that chemical debriefing. And I've been, at best, reluctant to do that. And so I don't know. I don't know that I would believe any recovered memories, because now I was there for 40 hours of the citizens hearing. I've read voraciously around this field, and so my mind's a little more polluted than you might want it to be to recover a pristine memory. But that's my story, the best I can tell it.
And it's very important to share it, because I think if you go back to the concept that in 1974 you were at Wright-Patterson, whether or not you had memory erasure on purpose, and they wanted to find out what you knew about Hangar 18, it is very possible, as somebody who was bright and was there and had won a science fair, that they also wanted to give you, in whatever altered state that you may have been in, even though this is speculation, it's based on other experiences that people have had, and they might have given you some kind of a suggestion in that altered state that go to Sandia Labs for reasons that no one fully understands, but that might be why you were so triggered by the idea that at one point you thought you might go to Sandia Labs.
I think that's the most reasonable explanation. I can't imagine anything else. And so I'm hopeful I'm on your show and others telling my story in the hope that a listener or some networking will lead me to someone that knows what was happening. I've not filed a FOIA request on myself, and perhaps I should do that. And the other thing I can say is, I've talked about this publicly at the Society for Scientific Exploration. I'm a full member of that organization. I gave a presentation on this in Boulder, and I've given it in Roswell and Laughlin and other conferences. But I pulled up, and it's part of my PowerPoint for that, I went to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base website. They have a website. And I haven't been there today, but when I was there a few months ago, it was still there. They have on their website, you can click on a link to their science fair page on their site, and they have a little guy dressed up like a little green alien, and it says, the Wright-Patterson is seeking to support science fairs to maximize STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM education in our high schools. So part of the mission of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, as they disclose it openly today, is to support high schools in science fairs and STEM education.
And it makes sense because they need bright minds, and they need minds that haven't been contaminated. So if they start young and get them into programs that would relate to a secret space program, they would have more control. And this is, as far as I know, this has been going on since the 1950s. And I wonder, Joseph, before you take off for your town hall, could you explain to us and to the Phenomena Radio listeners that you have been advocating that there be some kind of amnesty or protection for whistleblowers so that everybody can tell the truth without punishment?
Absolutely. And this comes because of, again, a scouting connection. In I believe it was 98, I was invited to, I'd done a national leadership training for the Boy Scouts at Iowa State University. And one of the people, one of my trainees was an adult who said, I'd like you to do this for my local council. I'm going to fly you down to Houston. And so they flew me down to Houston for a weekend at camp. And one of my close friends from the 1970s was a fellow named Roger Billica. We had served together on those leadership training conferences and scouting. And he had gone on to med school. Then he became a physician in the Grand Canyon in the backcountry. Then he joined the Air Force, became a pilot, and his goal was to fly on a shuttle. And he got hired by NASA as their chief medical officer and kept lobbying to get up on orbit. And then Challenger exploded in 87, and it kind of aged him out. But he was still there, and I believe it was 98. It was right before they flew John Glenn on a shuttle. And I said to my friend, this is ridiculous. You're not going to get any science on aging out of one guy. And he said, yeah. And I said, but I'm not complaining. John Glenn wants to fly. Neil Armstrong wants to fly in a shuttle. Man, these guys earned it. Fly them. But you're not getting science. And Roger said to me, well, Joe, you got to understand at NASA, if we have one data point in our report, we write our recent experience as shown. If we have two data points, we say, in a recently concluded series of experiments, we have proven. And if we have three data points, we say, time after time after time,
Wow.
And I said, we were having this grand conversation, and he took me into mission control. I got to sit in the flight surgeon's chair. I have a photo of that he took of me. It was just amazing. And coming out of mission control, which, by the way, was a bit disappointing because the building itself looks like a college dorm. It's built out of the same cinder block government boring. It doesn't look like it should. It's not out of Star Trek. But they had a government-issued cork bulletin board behind a pane of glass that could slide back and forth. The weekly world news, Bill Clinton greets alien coming off a shuttle. So I thought, this is cool. They have a sense of humor about it. And I said, so, Roger, it's not like we have flying saucers shadowing our shuttles on orbit. And it was the oddest thing. He says to me, Joe, before I respond to that question, I have 3 questions for you. Do you think I've ever lied to you? And I said, no. And I gave a longer answer, but for time here on the show, I'll leave it at that. He said, do you think there's anything anybody could do to me to cause me to lie to others? I said, no, we're both in scouting, we're in the Honor Society. No, Roger, why do you ask? He said, well, here's my 3rd question. Where do you want to go to lunch? And I said, that place in the right stuff where the astronauts all go. And he said, well, I'll take you to a place we might meet an astronaut. And then over lunch, he said to me, look, you got to understand, to get this kind of job, you have to sign certain contracts that basically eliminate the Bill of Rights. And as much as I might like to talk about certain things, even with my own wife, if I were to do so, I could go to a place worse than Leavenworth. We'd lose the health care benefits. She'd lose the pension. Please don't ask me about that again. Wow.
Non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah. And a pretty heavy.
He's working at NASA, and it must be related to UFOs and ETs.
I don't, he didn't say that, but the way he didn't talk about it has driven me then to run for Congress, first in 2008 and now again this year. And I'm calling for Congress to pass rigorous legislation protecting whistleblowers. We don't protect whistleblowers. The Obama administration was one of the worst at persecuting federal whistleblowers just for waste. But I said, let's pass legislation, protect whistleblowers for waste, fraud, criminal activity, and the ET issue. Why not? If there's evidence of that, it's a birthright of every human being on the planet to know. And then hold open hearings. This is what the founders intended for our Congress to do, to be the oversight body, to be the budgeting body, to be the purse strings, to restrain the executive branch. And Congress has largely abandoned its authority to the executive, and we get more and more, I won't quite say dictatorial or tyrannical, but an awfully powerful executive branch that's extra constitutional in my view. So I'm calling on Congress to hold those hearings and pull that back. And boy, when Steve Bassett put together the citizens hearing, that was a step in the right direction. Those 6 members of Congress that I served with started out skeptical and maybe a little embarrassed, and by Friday of that week were powerful advocates for calling on not only the Congress but the United Nations to take this witness testimony seriously. Well, to get that witness testimony, you've first got to pass legislation that says, hey, if you signed a contract with a military-industrial complex supplier or contractor that forbids you from disclosing waste or fraud or criminal activity or ET, you're removed from that. And hopefully the Congress still has the power to pass that legislation, to let those people, they don't need to reveal national secrets. I'm not talking about putting the nation at risk. But when it comes to wasting taxpayer money through fraud or criminal activity or anything related to the extraterrestrial issue, people ought to be free to speak about that without fear of something that sounds like Leavenworth or worse.
And Joe, do you think that would be possible to do an amnesty legislation before the 8-inch headlines around the world that we're not alone in the universe? Does that have to come first, the headline?
I don't know if it has to, but it sure would do a lot of good. These people are not nefarious. I know some in the disclosure movement just want to talk about everybody in our government as if they're somehow part of a cabal. My experience is these are good people that, in innocent ways, maybe in even ill-informed ways, or certainly not fully informed ways, assign things as patriots, and then they become bound by these, voluntary, if you want, contracts that they signed to get the job that they wanted.
And Joseph,
they shouldn't suffer the consequences of that.
And what you're describing is a reason for why all the way back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s with MK Ultra, that they would have had a very specific reason to erase memories of people that were being brought into a secret space program that began, as far as I have been told, at the end of the 50s, and that this was what they thought was going to be the way that they would be able to control, manipulate, and confine everyone's knowledge, because they would have chemical and sound manipulation and control on human minds, until it backfired with the people who began to talk, and MK Ultra finally ended up in front of the Frank Church congressional hearing, and that was supposed to be the end. But I don't think, that's what I guess to you and to Michael Gerloff, who we will transition to next, I don't think that it was shut down. Do you, Joe?
I have no idea. I'm sure that our government doesn't really ever stop doing anything that it finds at all useful, no matter what the cost is. They don't care about efficiency, and they certainly don't care about our debt, or really our national security. When you talk about 20 trillion in debt and 200 trillion in mandated unfunded current spending on the books is a crazy that I think we're going fast over a fiscal cliff. That's also part of what causes me to run. And certainly what was chilling in that conversation, and I'll say this too, Linda, that's not the only conversation like that I have had. It's the only one I talk about where I say who it was. But there are other people who share these things, and it's like, please, never mention my name.
Right.
And all of that comes out of scouting and long-term camping and backpacking, where people maybe feel a little freer to talk. And it's nothing particularly recent either. This goes back more than a decade ago. But it certainly got my undivided attention, and I certainly am a stand for if someone, and by the way, Mike Gravel said to Nick Pope and others at the citizens hearing, if you signed that kind of contract, ignore it. Your oath is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And if you were forced or manipulated into signing anything that violates the Constitution, the sacred law of this land, ignore it. And that's what Mike Gravel did. He read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record to protect the New York Times. Mike Gravel is an American hero. And to have him at the citizens hearing was huge.
Right.
I don't call on those people to do that. Why put your family, at that kind of risk? Not everybody is a Mike Gravel.
Right.
But I think Congress ought to do the right thing and eliminate the fear and restriction that those people may face, probably face, almost certainly face.
All right. And I really appreciate and honor the effort that you are making, and good luck on your congressional race in Utah. We will do this again on another Phenomena Radio, but right now, Joe, I want to transition to Michael Gerloff, who is in the also somewhat similar situation that some people have been, where they have had a very vivid memory of highly strange memories in a Marine recruitment context. And then it is as if they live a military life with a parallel background life that somehow is being erased. And that's what we're going to talk about next. I could not agree with you more as you head for your town hall. We need to get the United States of America back onto a square where we are all of, by, and for the people in truth. We all deserve to know what our government knows. Thank you, Joseph Buchmann, so much for being here.
Anytime, Linda. And if you want to check out my campaign website, it's www.govt. Go to L, like the letter L for liberty, GOTOL.vote. There's a new high-level domain name, .vote, for candidates for all offices. Go to L.vote, check it out. And Linda, thank you. Thank you for the work you do. You were a powerful witness there at the citizens hearing. We're coming up on the 5th anniversary of that this coming April. We should all get together and have a reunion. And thank you for the risks you've taken and the honesty you bring to this field. I am an admiring fan.
Thank you so much. We will talk again. Godspeed. And now I am going to introduce Michael Gerloff, who comes from Missouri in the central part of the United States, born and raised, and that one of the subjects that Michael Gerloff came to me recently to ask about was a series of events that began in his memory when he was age 8 in the 3rd grade. And he had a teacher come to him to do a special test. And Michael Gerloff, I want to welcome you to Phenomenon Radio after you have heard Joseph Buchmann describe a context for why the entire audience should now listen to what you have experienced in the context of a history in the United States where chemicals and sound and other influences have been used to erase memory, manipulate minds, and that those working in NASA sign non-disclosure agreements about subjects that are related to an alien presence on this planet. Welcome to Phenomenon Radio.
Thank you, Linda, and Race as well. Joseph, I've enjoyed hearing what you had to say. Linda, it's an honor and a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Could you start by describing what happened in 3rd grade? And we will keep unfolding the story from the 3rd grade to when you graduate from high school and go to the Marines. But start in that classroom.
Yes, Linda. This is my first memory of receiving specialized testing during my grade school and high school years. On this day, my teacher, she's a lady that's still alive today, and I, in fact, recently just spoke with her about this very issue. Before I get into it, I would like to say she was very open when I spoke with her. I described the test that she gave me that day. And it's very important to point out, she did not remember the exact specific event itself. But when I described the test to her, the details of the test, she immediately responded to me, "Oh, you're describing the tests that we gave back then for the gifted programs that were in place." So my description triggered in her a response where, "Oh yes, you're being very accurate in your description." To describe the test, first of all, my teacher came and got me from my desk and took me out of the class and took me to a location where we sat down, and she got out a box of very nicely produced testing materials. This test had 3 distinct parts. The first part of the test involved the ability to remember different lengths of alpha numeric code. I use code because that's the only descriptor I can think of. And what they would do is she would flip up a flashcard and show that to me, and then another. And I think we started at 4 digits, and we slowly worked our way up. And the whole point of this test was to see if you had the ability to remember the series of numeric, alphanumeric characters. And it kept going. And it got to the point where she began asking me, "Can you recite that backwards?" And, as an 8-year-old kid in 3rd grade, I have to say I was quite astonished at my ability to do that. I was a little bit surprised. And I could tell by the look on her face as she gave me the first part of the test.
And Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't what you were doing being able to retain in your mind's eye, like pictures in your mind's eye, of the alphanumeric symbols that she was showing you on the flashcards? That's the key. You could still see the pictures in your mind.
Yes, I believe that was the whole point of it. And I guess that's another way of describing spatial reasoning or something similar to that.
In the cases, especially of military people I've interviewed who have gotten binary code, they have this ability to hold the code in their mind's eye until they write it down. Not everybody can do that. And this seems also to be, from a few other things that I have learned, is one of the key factors for testing whether somebody has the ability to take telepathic images, symbols, and codes from a non-human into their mind and then translate it. Now, I know that that's a bit of a leap from your third grade test to ETs, but now would you go to you graduate from high school in 1978, and on May 31st, 1978, you are in San Diego, California, and you are at the Marines Recruit Training Depot, and you want to enlist to be a Marine. Tell everybody in as many details what happened.
Well, Linda, as is common in any boot camp environment in any of our military services, the first day is typically a lot of running around, a lot of hectic activity. At the end of that first day, we got virtually no sleep. In fact, I got none at all. We got to bed probably 4 o'clock in the morning, San Diego time. And I just couldn't sleep, probably a little bit nervous and out of my comfort zone. So waited for the sun come up. That next morning, we broke up into different groups, and we were sent for testing, diagnostic testing, if you will. And the whole day was dedicated to that. Again, I would describe the testing as spatial reasoning type testing, or at least the testing that I took was like that. They had us set up in individual semi-private cubicles. There were probably, I'd say, I can't remember the exact numbers, but there were 40 to 60 other Marine recruits in this room with me. And it went all day long. It was probably mid-afternoon, and we were on the very last test of the day. That test just so happened to be on International Morse Code. I was taking my test, giving it my best shot. And I estimate that I was approximately 3/4 of the way through and still had plenty of time, to get to the end of the test and complete the entire thing. And I noticed this Marine corporal out of my peripheral vision approach me. He reached out and tapped me on the shoulder, and he asked me, "Is your name Michael Gerloff?" And, yes, sir. I responded very quickly. Now, I've got to tell you, Linda, before we started taking our exams that day, we were warned very seriously about the ramifications of violating the honor code, of cheating, looking on other people's work, and things like that. And I initially thought, and I feared, that he believed I had somehow violated the honor code. So, I was, sir, I started letting him know, sir, I was not cheating. And he let me know right away, look, that's not why I'm here speaking with you. And he said again, come with me. Well, I realized that I hadn't finished the test. I knew I had time to complete it. And I let him know that, sir, I'm not quite done with the test, and I would, I've got plenty of time to finish. And again, he said, look, just shut up and come with me. I could tell I was frustrating him a little bit. So I followed his instructions. I got up and followed him out of that testing room. He took me through a set of doors in the corner of this room. And this room was a fairly large room and had to accommodate all these Marine recruits that were in there testing. He took me through the doorway, down a hallway, and on the left, there was a small room that he took me into. The moment we walked through the door, I scanned the room, and I could see a gray metal table, 2 gray metal chairs sitting across from one another. And in the opposite corner of that room, there was another door. This Marine, he was a Marine corporal, actually. He told me to have a seat and wait, and somebody would be with me shortly. I did so. I'd say less than a minute passed, and this young Marine captain came through the door in the opposite corner of the room, and he was carrying a folder. I'd say that folder was approximately a half inch thick. He came in and sat down and shook my hands, and he began congratulating me. He opened the folder, and I could tell this folder pertained to me. And I must say, I was a little surprised at how thick it was, considering I was just in my second day of boot camp. It seemed like maybe a little more information than I would have thought they would have had on me to that point. I remember he started talking to me about how good my test scores were, and that there were particular skills that, they were seeing within my test scores that were of particular interest to them. And then he looked at me and he said, Michael, I brought you in here because I want to ask you a very serious question. And, I'm 18 years old and I'm wondering, what in the world is all of this about? And, he let me know that he was going to ask me a very serious question and that it was a very important matter. And I said, sir, how can I help you? And he just, with the most serious look on his face, he said, how would you like to go to space? Now, Linda, I'm an 18-year-old kid. I grew up, just fascinated and mesmerized with NASA, with I could remember the Mercury program, the Gemini, the Apollo programs, and I was really mesmerized by that stuff as a kid. I thought I was very proud of the fact that our country was achieving those things.
And he's a Marine asking you if you would like to go to space, and what did you say back?
Well, I openly snickered. I openly went, I just kind of laughed and went, excuse me, sir? And his facial expression did not change. He was being very serious, and he said, "Look, Michael, I'm being very serious, and I'm asking you a very serious question." And I asked him, I said, "Sir, what about NASA? As far as I know, that's the entity that goes into space." And he went, "Look, Michael, there are things that the public is unaware of. There are programs that exist that the public is unaware of, and we're offering you the opportunity to be a part of this. And you should be very honored to have been asked." Linda, I was feeling a little bit of pressure there. What? And I asked him, "Sir, what if I decide this isn't for me? What would be the result of that?" And he said, "No, you absolutely have the ability to decline it, and that is going to be totally okay." I thought, go ahead, Linda.
And at that point, you have a big concern about the fact that you thought you were there to sign up for a 6-year Marine Reserve special enlistment program because you wanted to go to college in parallel with your Marine existence. And when you said that to him, what did he say?
He immediately responded, again, like you just said, Linda. I said, "Look, sir, I signed a totally different contract. What would be the obligation for this service?" And he said it will be a 20-year obligation. My mind immediately went to my family. I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. And then I asked him, "Sir, would I get to see my family during this time, and how often would I get to see them?" And without, changing his facial expression in any way, he looked me right in the eye. He even drew a little closer to me across the table. And he said, "Michael, your family will never even know that you were gone." And now, Linda, I have to tell you, I grew up with Lost in Space, which, by the way, I think is the greatest show that's ever existed. Time Tunnel, Star Trek, all these different wonderful shows that were there in the 60s. Well, when he responded that my parents, my family would never even know that I was gone, the implications of that alone made my imagination run wild. I did not hesitate for maybe a couple seconds, and my right hand went in the air, and I said, "I will absolutely do this." The moment I responded that way, the facial expression on this young captain changed from a stern look to a smile. He he was very happy. He said, Michael, this is a great thing. You are, he reached across the table and shook my hand again. Thank you. That's such great news.
And Michael, to take a break, but when we come back, let's pick up what happened after he shakes your hand and the process that has left you wondering, is that where the beginning of a secret space program started, but in your mind, there's a missing track?
Thank you, Linda. This 50-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio is brought to you by OnlineVibes.com, your personal connection to mind, body, and spirit, committed to connecting you with healing modalities that can manifest a true and healthy change in your life. Visit the website at OnlineVibes.com. Tonight's very special guest, Michael Gerloff, will join the show right after these brief messages. Don't go anywhere.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Around the world for decades have come high strangeness reports of mysterious aerial lights, beams, animal mutilations, human abductions, secret space and military programs focused on an alien presence. One reporter of these Earth mysteries is Emmy Award-winning TV producer, writer, and editor Linda Moulton Howe. She reports and edits the science, environment, and real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com.
We are moving from the paradigm that we are alone in the universe to a new one in which we are not alone. And something out there is interacting with us, our animals and plant life, forcing glimpses of other realities upon us.
Linda has produced 4 large books about these phenomena with hundreds of color images and illustrations that reviewers such as New York Times best-selling author Jim Marrs describes as an amazing accumulation of evidence. All her books, An Alien Harvest, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, along with documentaries, are available in the shop at Earthfiles.com.
In this special election, Utah has the chance to change Washington, D.C. permanently. And it's not going to be by sending another Republican or Democrat back to D.C. Utah, it's time to go to L. I am a lifelong principled fiscal conservative who's taught finance at major universities both here and abroad. I've seen the waste and fraud and theft of massive taxation up close, and I am uniquely qualified to fight for the tax reform and fiscal sanity we so desperately need. The 2 old parties have shown for over 3 generations that neither one of them are capable of consistent fiscal conservatism. So for this special election, I invite you to do something special. Dump the D's, reject the R's, and go to L with me. I'm Dr. Joe Buchmann, professor of finance, principled fiscal conservative, libertarian for Utah's 3rd district, and I approved this message.
Paid for by the Joe Buchmann for Congress Committee.
For years, the KGRA digital broadcast station has been your contact for live UFO paranormal talk radio worldwide, bringing you the top names in research and investigations 7 nights a week. Our listeners connect to the KGRA on various platforms like TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and many more. Now, you can stream your favorite paranormal talk radio shows with our new fully integrated custom KGRA mobile apps for Android and iPhones. Listen to your favorite paranormal talk shows from any mobile device 24/7, free with smartphone or tablet. Utilize custom features to access news, show pages, archives, contests, events, and live interactive chat rooms. Set show notification alerts and never miss your favorite live programs. All free and available to download in Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hi, this is Matt Ray for My Pillow. Look, I'd forgotten what a good night's sleep was like. Then I got a hold of My Pillow. I used to wake up with neck and shoulder pain. I thought it was the new normal. But after one night of using My Pillow, my neck and shoulder pain is gone, and I'm sleeping comfortably through the night. My Pillow's patented interlocking fill conforms to your personal sleep needs. It's guaranteed not to go flat. It's washable, it's dryable, and it's made in the USA, not to mention the 10-year warranty. Try it risk-free with a 60-day money-back guarantee. What have you got to lose besides back pain and shoulder pain? Right now, America's First News has a great deal. Try it for yourself. Call now. You'll get 50% off a 4-pack. That's 2 premium pillows and 2 travel pillows. Call now, 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY, R-A-Y. That's 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRAradio.com.
You're listening to the KGRA digital broadcast station, Van Buren, Arkansas, Salt Lake City, Utah. Before we begin hour 2 of tonight's interview with Michael Gerloff, it's time for the news brought to you by Earthfiles.com. Here's Linda Moulton Howe. Linda?
Thanks, Race. You know, science data keeps piling up with signs that Mars was once habitable enough to support life. On September 5th, 2017, in the journal Geophysical Research Letters, postdoc researcher Dr. Patrick Gazda at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico reports that boron has been found on Mars. The NASA Curiosity rover's ChemCam instrument detected boron in calcium sulfate mineral veins. The ChemCam stands for chemistry and camera. It shoots out a powerful laser to zap Martian rocks so that they can see what minerals they contain. And finding boron is extremely important. What Dr. Gazda reported this month is that boron was present in Martian groundwater at temperatures between 32 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit with a pH of neutral to alkaline, very habitable. Scientists think that boron stabilizes the sugar molecule ribose. Ribose is that important ingredient of ribonucleic acid, more commonly known as RNA. All known living cells contain ribose molecules, and that they control the metabolic process. But ribose can be very unstable, and that's where boron comes in. When boron is dissolved in water, it becomes borate. And borate can interact with ribose and stabilize the sugar molecule so that it then can make RNA a vital ingredient for all organic life as we know it. Dr. Gazda says, quote, because borates may play an important role in making RNA, one of the building blocks of life, finding boron on Mars further opens the possibility that life really could have once arisen on that planet. Borates are one possible bridge from simple organic molecules to RNA, and without RNA, you have no life. That's why the presence of boron is so important, close quote. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earthfiles news updates on KGRA Radio and visit every day my science, environment, and real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com, for more on breaking stories about our universe, the solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news brought to you by Earthfiles.com. Now back to the program.
Michael, we just got up to the Marine captain saying and offering you to come into a secret space program, and he has shaken your hand. Can you now unfold what happens when he passes you on to somebody else?
Yes, Linda. Yes, it's very important to point out that during that conversation, I want to make sure that I make this clear. It was made very clear to me that this was not only service to my country, that this was also service to the world and humanity. And that was another enticement that, made my decision very easy. While he was shaking my hand and thanking me for saying yes and being willing to come into the program, he looked over my shoulder and he said, when we're done, there are these two gentlemen behind you, you'll go with them. Two other Marines had entered the room through the same door this captain had come into the room through. And as he was shaking my hand, he asked me, before you go, is there anything that I can do for you? Well, Linda, on that first day of boot camp, there were a couple critical things that happened. I'll try to compress this so we can, get to the other stuff. But you fill out a couple postcards to send home to your family and let them know that you're there okay. And then you have the opportunity to get in line and make a phone call home. Well, on that first day, my parents weren't home and I didn't get to speak with them. So when he asked me if there was anything that he could do for me, my first thought was, gosh, I'd love to be able to speak with my parents. So I said, sir, I didn't get to make a phone call home, and I would very much like to do that. And then I started to say, I promise I won't talk about anything you and I have discussed. And he kind of smiled and he said, no, I can't do that. But Michael, what I will do is I will send a telegram home to your family to let them know that you've arrived safely. He then thanked me again and handed me off to these other two Marines. These other two Marines, they took me through that door that they had come through out into a hallway. And immediately on the right, there was a door, and we started going down the staircase. My memory says we went down 2 flights of steps. And when we got to the end of those steps and opened the door, there was a very large tunnel that is underground there underneath the Marine base in San Diego. The length of the tunnel was so long that I could not see the other end of it. Now, this was much larger than even a big hallway. This really looked kind of like a heavy-duty industrial strength tunnel. And there was an electric cart sitting there. One of the Marines told me to get on board, which I did, and he started driving me down this tunnel. I had a little nervous energy, and I thought, well, I'll try to strike up a conversation here. And I started talking to this other Marine. He was not interested at all in having conversation with me. He remained silent. I could sense that he wished to do so, so I just shut up and continued on with the ride. Now, Linda, that is one of the points in this memory where a lot of that is very fuzzy. I cannot remember the entire trip on that electric cart, but I have a suspicion that they either took me to another location on the Marine base or possibly to the naval base that is right beside the Marine Recruit Training Depot in San Diego. Irregardless of where we were, the next thing I remember is myself and several other Marine recruits. We are standing outside of this door, all waiting to be invited inside the door. And the purpose of going into this room was to sit down and begin filling out all the paperwork related to coming into this program, the administrative intake, if you will. And I must say, never in my life have I ever filled out that much paperwork before.
And some of it, Michael, right, was NASA.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And I remember as we went through that process, when that paperwork was laid out in front of me. Now, I want to point out, I had a specialist, an administrative specialist, that was with me during this entire time, assisting me with all of this paperwork. And I remember when the NASA paperwork was laid out in front of me, how excited and I just couldn't believe it. I was in disbelief that, here my whole life, I've admired NASA and always secretly wanted to be an astronaut and all those things. And I made that comment to this administrative specialist that was assisting me. And again, he was not interested in having any real conversation with me. In fact, he said, hey, yeah, that's all real neat. Shut up and let's focus on what we've got to do here so we can get done. And, I complied. It seemed like it took quite a few hours, at least 2 to 3, possibly 4 hours to get all that paperwork done. And it's also important to point out, there were many other people in that room with me going through the same process. I would estimate a couple dozen individuals were all part of that process with me.
Michael, do you remember if there was anything that talked about covert, secret, space program, SSP, anything like that in the NASA papers that you signed?
I don't remember verbiage like that, exactly, Linda. I know I signed several forms that were NASA paperwork. Part of those forms were obviously they had to be non-disclosure agreements, and other things that I was signing. But I never saw paperwork that said SSP or secret space program on them. I never saw a descriptor like that.
So was the Marine captain who offered you this 20-year-long program to be in I think he said covert space program, and you didn't have to worry about your family would not know you were gone, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking they must have some kind of Star Trek type technology where we will be traveling in time?
He never elaborated on that. He made no specific commentary related to that. Having been a fan of the Time Tunnel show as a kid, the implications were clear to me that that's what they were saying in so many words, but he never elaborated specifically on that.
But do you think, looking back at that point down in that room, somewhere off of that big tunnel, could you have started moving into something that was somehow separating your mind literally into 2 tracks? That how do you explain going from all the paperwork and signing up in this Marine Reserve program for 20 years in a secret space program when your human side of life wasn't able to sustain even your marriage? Can you try to wrestle and explain what your perspective today is on what seems like an impossible jumble?
I think I can elaborate on that a little bit, Linda. It's obvious to me from this experience that yes, my memory and my mind were affected by this experience. It's obvious to me with some of the other memories that have bled through over the years. Like in the 80s, I started having memories of actually using, I don't know how to describe it in any other way than to say something similar to Stargate technology.
Describe it physically, what you see in your mind's eye as you say that now. Color, size, shape.
If I were to use the first Stargate movie as an example, I would say that, as far as in that movie, they show like a standalone ring that, stands alone out in a room. This wasn't like that. It wasn't as big as that. And what I remember being part of had, lots of equipment packed up close to it. It wasn't a standalone item like that.
In a room or outside, or what's the environment?
It seemed to me that we were in an underground facility, that I was surrounded by military and civilian personnel during, in these memories. I do remember that the first time that I saw the Stargate movie in the theaters, I believe that was in 94 or 95, something like that. having had those memories already come through in the 80s, Linda, when I saw that movie, I was amazed at how real the actual, the inner diameter of that, it was more like a cylinder than a standalone hoop. Remember in the movie, there's almost this liquid metal sheen that they, with special effects create in the movie. I was amazed at how very much similar the movie appeared to be compared to my memories.
Okay, what was it that you were actually seeing that is different from Hollywood, that is, as far as you're concerned, are flashbacks to you interacting with a technology that you associate with moving point to point in space or moving in time?
Could you rephrase that question, Linda? I apologize.
What do you remember in your mind's eye of what you were actually seeing that you associate with some sort of transport, point to point, and or time transport? Okay,
no, I understand. Linda, those memories involve more than just, one day or like one little snippet of time. That memory involves the evening before, the discussions that I had with technicians and military personnel about what I was preparing to do, that I was in fact getting ready to go to a different time. The specifics of a location or, like a year or something like that, I can't provide that information. But I remember having long conversations the night before with what appeared to me to be my colleagues about, going through checklists, reminders of, what you must do to pull this off successfully. Those memories roll into the next day, and I can remember all the way up to the very moment that I was given the go-ahead and I walked through into that cylinder. I have nothing that I could provide as a memory on the other side of that, but I do have the memories leading up to that, or parts of them anyway.
Have you been able to see in flashbacks anything that we could relate to as being part of a covert space program?
Yes, Linda. I can tell you that I have memories of being on the moon. Those memories, different memories have squeezed through over the years. And these memories of the moon, they didn't come into my life until, the early 2000s. In these memories, I am obviously in a very dark place. I'm in a suit. I'm in a dark space suit, if you will. Nothing like what you would see the astronauts wearing in Apollo 11 or anything like that. These suits were much more streamlined. The helmet wasn't a big round bubular thing. It was far more streamlined. And quite honestly, the equipment looked a lot more simplistic than what we've seen in the Apollo missions. In this memory, I am with a small group of people who, it is obvious to me, we have just arrived there. It's obvious to me that we are learning the procedures for traveling around the facility that we're at. It's also obvious to me that I'm on the dark side of the moon. The structures that I have in these memories had a very bright lighting, like external lighting that lit up, the areas around the buildings and shone down on the ground. And it looked, very, very much like the moon to me. And what we were doing on this day, or in this memory, is we were learning how to travel from one structure to another, going through what I could only describe as an airlock. And we had instructors with us. We had people that were with us teaching us the procedures and the steps for doing this and how to do it correctly and safely.
Michael, are you in something like a moving sidewalk that we would think of at an airport? Are you in a tunnel that is above ground or below ground? What is the physical environment that you're going in and out of airlocks?
These are stationary walkways that we're on. These were structures that they looked to me to be, fairly modern man-made structures, metal, with, the floors didn't move or anything. They were stationary walkways. And the whole exercise was to exit one structure. And by the way, we were elevated. From the memory, I'm believing I'm at least 30 feet above the ground below me outside. When we transfer from one structure to the next, the door opens up, we go out, we walk across a stationary catwalk that is made of material much like any catwalk you would see in an American factory. We walk, it's probably 50 feet, 60 feet to the other door. The building we are preparing to go into appears identical to the one that we just walked out of, with the very same type of doorway airlock system. And I can see people through the window of that door watching us. When we get across to the other side, the door opens up, and Linda, there is a camera crew there filming our activities. They really weren't engaging us verbally. It was almost like they were there to just be in the background and document our activities.
Any symbols of any kind on anybody's jackets, hat, or anything?
And not that I recall. No, it wasn't like that.
Did they look like they were working for, let's say, the Marines or somebody else?
I couldn't distinguish that. It seemed to me like, it's possible it could have been a military film crew documenting our activities, but there was nothing that I could identify on the suits that would give away an organizational affiliation.
Did you have any kind of a logo or emblem on the suit that you are wearing?
I do not recall that, no.
And why would raised, we'll call them raised like street sidewalks on the backside of the moon up some 30, 40 feet from the ground, why would an exercise going in and out of airlocks be so important there? What was this structure? Why was it there? Why would you have to rehearse or learn how to go in and out of airlocks?
Excuse me, Linda. There is safety. Safety is a very important thing, as we all know. And my feeling from those memories is that was a big part of what we were learning that day, how to safely engage the physical environment around us, how to travel from one structure to the other. Linda, I couldn't tell you exactly what the purpose of the structure was, if it was a barracks or some sort of, what type of facility it was. My memory of that event doesn't go that deeply.
And
but procedural safety was probably the main focus of that exercise.
And can you describe the buildings and compare them to any buildings that you've seen on Earth? What were these buildings like on the backside of the moon in terms of color and size and construction material and geometry and so forth?
The structures that we were transferring from and to had a very modular look about them, like they had been, sectionally fabricated and then assembled in place. I don't know how to describe it any better than that, or to make better sense of it than that. But yes, these seemed to be fairly new looking structures, and they had a really modular quality to them.
Color?
Dark in color, gray, brown, colors like that is what I remember from the memories.
any kind of what we would call windows to look out or in?
Again, there were windows on the airlock doors. The one that I exited from, and we walked across the catwalk to the other door. There were windows there, but I don't recall. The memories don't go far enough for me to say, "Hey, as we walked down the hallways, I saw other windows and looked out them." That's not part of my memory.
Now, you were in front of that Navy captain who was asking you if you would like to join the Marines in a secret space program or covert space program. And that day was June 1st, 1978. And you signed all those papers in that tunnel, in that room. And he had told you it was a 20-year commitment, but that you wouldn't have to worry, that your family would not even know you were gone. They wouldn't be aware. And that's where you thought maybe this was going to be involved with technology that might be able to manipulate space and time in some way. And yet you would be doing things and then being able to get back to Earth quickly. And with that as background, November 3rd, 1987, that's when everything came crashing down in your personal life, right? And you were leaving the Marines.
No, November 3rd of 1987. That was the date that I joined the Army.
Okay, but that was precipitated by, that's right, it's 84. It was
yes.
84 that everything came crashing down. And can you explain, because this is the part that is so hard to understand, how any human mind can be manipulated, whether it is by chemicals, hypnosis, sound, and other options that you and I may not even know about right now. How could your mind, can you describe what you think from the time that you left that tunnel, signing those papers, NASA was on them, you're really excited because you're going to go into a secret space program, and there's 20 years, and that would be 78 to 98. But by 84, explain, your marriage is falling apart, your life seems to be coming apart.
Yes. Well, Linda, it's very important to point out that when I originally joined the Marine Corps, my contract was for 6 years with the United States Marine Corps Reserve. And this program was called the Reserve Special Enlistment Program. The idea of that was that I would get out of Marine boot camp. I would attend drill meetings with a unit in Kansas City once a month, and that I would go to college and eventually enter into the Marine Corps officer program, which I eventually did in late 81, early 82. I went ahead and enrolled in the United States Marine Corps officer program. It was a program called PLC, the platoon leaders class. I attended the first half of that training. I graduated number one in my class. I was peer reviewed by my colleagues as the honor grad, or something similar to that. Came home, kept going to school, and in late 82, early 83, my marriage began to fall apart. I was having great difficulty with that, and school began to suffer. And ultimately, I made the decision, rather than lose my marriage, that I would go ahead and withdraw from this officer program, pay back all of the, they were giving me financial assistance during this time, pay back all that money and withdraw from the program. And I did. I was raised to believe that you work to save your marriage. And so that was my obligation and my intention. Michael, I did that. Yes.
Let me ask you an important question here. Was there any part of your mind at that point in 84 that said, am I going crazy because some part of my life is in the secret space program and some part of my life is with the Marine 6-year Corps and my wife. And did anything ever get into your left analytical brain about other parallel tracks?
Linda, I remembered the recruitment into this program and the filling out of all this paperwork. I never lost those memories. I remembered that from that day on. And I was able, when I got home from boot camp, I went directly to college. I started college, I believe, the next week. And that weighed heavily on my mind for several months, these memories of being recruited into this. And I was able to compartmentalize that, lock that away in a closet, and lean on that door and keep that at bay very effectively. Only occasionally would it pop through. But to answer your question, by 84, I really wasn't having any issues with those memories. Nothing had really popped through yet that made me think deeply about it. I was more, I guess, plugged into the matrix and trying to satisfy the requirements of that than worrying too much about, what had gone on in the Marine Corps at that time.
But you can see that we started on the square of a Marine captain asking you if you wanted to be in a covert space program. And it would be a 20-year commitment. And you would think at some point in the 6 years, now we're up to 84, when your marriage is falling apart and you want to leave the Marine Corps, that if they in fact have you in this secret space program in some mind manipulation way, you would think that you would have said to somebody, are you erasing memories from my mind? Am I in the secret space program? There is the schizophrenia of the whole situation that is hard to comprehend, and yet that there are other examples, even from MK Ultra, of people having these double, triple lives and having their minds erased. And that's what I'm trying to find out from you, if you have any sense that even through all of that collapse in your family and leaving the Marine Corps, do you think that you were still doing these projects that took you to the backside of the moon?
Linda, my belief is this. I believe that the day that I was recruited, I filled out that paperwork. I departed. I believe that I did my 20 years, and I was sent back to boot camp, to that very moment where I was recruited. That is how this is all played out for me. I believe that I actually went and did my 20 years of service, and that I was returned back to boot camp to that very first day. And I finished Marine boot camp and graduated on August 27th of 1978. Now, do I believe that after that point that I was involved on some level, some further level in the SSP? I have suspicions that is very possible. I also think it's very possible that when I served in the Army, that I was involved in some way in a similar program.
Well, before we jump now to this transition to the Army, which is very important about your missing DD-214, let me just ask one perspective, that when you say, I, on one track, may have done my entire 20 years in the Marine, you mean in a timeline separate from the Missouri wife?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just to help the audience, in the abduction syndrome, you do encounter people who say, well, Travis Walton is one. Travis thinks that in that forest, back in the 75 period, that when he jumped out of the truck with his logger colleagues And he ran because there was this diamond-shaped craft right where they had been logging, and it was pulsing. And that Travis was sitting right next to the door in the passenger seat. The other guys were spread around in the truck. And he, for some reason, he wanted to get closer, and he goes out of that truck, and he showed me right there at that spot in the forest. He ran down, he got down on his hands and knees behind a lot of the fresh logs that they had cut that day and were piled up quite a ways. And as he listens and he hears that throbbing craft, and he made the sound for me, very low throbbing sound, and it started getting faster and faster. He said, "Linda, I just had to see it." And he took his 6'2", 6'3" young body, and he jumped up in the air above the cut logs. And that's when the beam hit him, and he thinks he died there. And that it was a craft that did not have life forms on it, that it was a self-activating technology. It was an offensive, defensive move by the craft, and it killed him. But that the craft or drone was owned and operated by some kind of blonde Nordic types who came back, got Travis, and took him to resurrect him and bring him back to life. Now, in talking with him that day in the forest and many times since, he says, "I know on Earth I was reported being gone 5 days. But Linda, I think I was with those blondes for a very long time." And I bring this up as one of the few parallels that I could possibly muster that might help all of us try to relate that when you say you served 20 years in that secret space program, but you still were like a doppelganger living in this parallel track on Earth.
Yes. There's a good way that I can explain that, Linda. When I got home from boot camp in late August of '78, my little sister and my father were waiting for me at the airport. And the moment I met them, the moment I got around them, I felt as if I had been away from them for years. I felt like I had been missing out of their lives for a very long time. They seemed somehow different to me. Just everything seemed odd and different. I came home and I adjusted and, got ready to go to college. But I'll never forget this one moment with my mother. I had been home a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. And one day my mother came up and she put her hands around my face and she pulled me really closely to her. And in a very emotive, very genuine and sincere way, she looked me in the eyes and she said, "What have they done with my son? Where are you?" Linda, I felt stretched out. I felt like I had been somewhere for a very, very long time and that I was coming home after a tremendously long absence. I hope that's kind of what you're trying to get out of me there.
And that we are describing something that is very difficult. There's no language for it. That our government, through interactions with other intelligences, has learned how to back engineer a tremendous amount of technology that relates to bending space-time, moving point to point, moving in time. You are not the only person that I have talked to off the record who say that they were in the military and they had assignments in which they moved in time. And their descriptions of moving forward, backward in time are fascinating because it isn't the sense of we get in an airplane and we travel in an airplane around this Earth and we're aware of our travel. The people I've talked to say, you don't even think you've done anything, but you're in a different point in space-time. So we are trying to come up now with a language, and that you ended up in all of this period of time, as you just said, your mom was noticing something and you were feeling weird. But there was that telegram that the Marine captain, when he asked you if he could help you all the way back to 1978, right at the handshake, and you asked him if he could send a telegram to your family. Explain how that telegram from 1978 ends up playing such an important role. Telegram or envelope with a letter, I think it was. Explain how, in some odd way, there are these like touchstones that seem to focus suddenly in your life and mind, and then kind of patch together pieces that you've forgotten.
Well, the significance of the telegram, Linda, there's another part of that story that, I don't know if we have the time to get into it, but, the listeners will remember that I mentioned that this captain said he would send a telegram home to my family. And that conversation has always been a part of these memories. After I got home and all the way through my life up to this point, or up to last May anyway, I never thought that telegram would have existed. I never even considered that seriously. That's always been part of the memory. But I always thought, there's no way that document would exist. Last year, I was visiting my mother and father on a Sunday afternoon, and we were going through old boxes of pictures and, old documents and stuff like that, doing some reminiscing and enjoying an afternoon together. And I watched my father as he was digging through this box. He picked out this envelope and opened it up and, took the paper out and was reading it. And I noticed, he looked at me and he said, "Son, I believe this belongs to you." And he put it back in the envelope and brought it over to me and handed it to me. And on the way over, he started describing to me, remembering receiving this in the mail. And, I wasn't really sure what he was talking about at first. He handed it to me. I pulled the contents of the envelope out. The envelope, is from the Department of the Navy. It's I've still got the envelope and all that. And I pulled that letter or, the document out of that envelope. And it was the very telegram that this Marine captain and I had this conversation about back in 1978, in June of 1978. The moment I looked at that telegram, the instant I realized what I was holding in my hands, as if sucked backwards through a pipe, I was delivered right back to the recruitment process in 1978. Now, again, I had remembered this and allowed it to come out of that compartment occasionally throughout my life. But holding that in my hand and looking at it with my own eyes, it transported me right back through that entire process. And from that moment on, it opened up other doors that allowed other memories, other small parts of all these memories to start coming through. And again, that was May of 2016, and that triggered an opening up of memories for me that has progressed and steadily increased since that time to this day.
And can you now put your memories on the backside of the moon did they only start since you had that telegram in your hand?
No. Those memories started coming through in the early 2000s. The other memories that have started to come through are more related to the briefings that I was part of when I was getting ready to return from the secret space program.
What do you remember?
Conversations about, briefing me that I would be monitored. That during the years of my life that there were going to be people checking on me. And, one of the things I've heard some of the other whistleblowers comment on is that there was a promise made that you would be taken care of in life, that you wouldn't receive the typical 20-year retirement, like, another Marine that served, in a 20-year career here on Earth. What they made sure you understood was that you would have a helping hand in life, that there would always be someone looking out for you and assisting you wherever that was possible. But, yeah, that's it. Help me out, Linda. Where did I stop off there? I tricked myself.
Okay, my question was that did the memories on the moon and other things start breaking through last year when you held that telegram, and you're saying, no, that you had started to remember some of the briefings going in and out of something that you would put in that secret space program. And I'm curious, do you have any sense of content specifically about 2017 to 2026 time period?
Yes. And for me, this is where, my obligation, I want to make sure the listeners understand that I am of the belief right now, at this moment in life, I have a DD Form 214 that clearly lays this out, that I have never been discharged from the Marine Corps. You've seen that document yourself. Right. I believe with all of my heart and soul that I have an obligation left in this march that I've been on all these years, and that is to come forward with this information for the Republic, for the good of humanity, and make sure that we reveal this information to the world. The secrecy has been a very damaging thing in many ways for everyone involved here. And it goes to another thing, Linda. Having served in the Marine Corps, having served in the Army, having served as a police officer in a major West Coast city, I raised my hand and swore an oath to protect and defend this country and its Constitution 3 different times. I take that very seriously. That, some of the people I admire most in this world, I've heard them make comments that there is no expiration date on that oath. And I know now that telegram helped trigger and open some other parts of my memory that indicate to me that I am yet on a mission to help get this information out and make disclosure more possible for humanity.
Were you ever exposed in any briefing to any content or any time travel or point-to-point travel to what the future of this planet between 2017 and 2026 looks like?
Not specifically in that way, Linda. I do remember briefings. I do remember sitting and having conversations about knowing that there was going to be a moment in this time frame that we are in now where disclosure was going to be, an attempt was going to be made to make that occur. And that a lot of what would determine that would be the lawlessness that we could potentially see related to our politics and the conduct of some, not all members of our government are evil and bad people. I don't want to come across with that message, but that there was going to be a moment where people were going to have to, acknowledge that we're a little bit in trouble here, and that we need to stop with all the secrecy, and that we need to get this information out, not just, for humanity's sake. It's very important.
But you were shown, right, geophysical images?
Yes. Linda, when all this began for me, this process began about 2 years ago, when I really started having, some other memories coming through. For the first time, I had started letting that closet come open. And I started having dreams. I do meditate occasionally, and I started having dreams and, visions are a bad word, but I started having meditations where I was seeing the world just inundated with water, flooding in the streets, and the other unfortunate things that accompany that. And it would be very easy for a person to let that bother them, probably too much. I don't know if I'm being shown alternate timelines there or what I'm being shown, but I do believe that there's potential that we face Earth changes. It's obvious that we are traveling through a cycle on the edge of our galaxy here that's approximately 26,000 years in duration, and along with that comes changes in energy and other things. And I'm just wondering if that's what this has to do with.
Let me ask you a question about the secret space program as a name and a concept. Were you ever exposed? Do you have any memories of a secret space program's mission? Were you ever exposed to the idea of allies and enemies and Earth secret war?
I can't speak to the concept of allies and enemies, but what I can speak to is memories of being briefed that there were many unknowns. There were many things that we did not understand. And, that was part of my recruitment, that, you're being given an opportunity to go out and help us begin to understand some things that we don't understand.
Like what? Like what?
Well, like the ET presence on the planet, the fact that they seem to have the ability to just do pretty much whatever they want, go where they want, and there's very little that we can do about it, and nor do we understand it very well. The idea that there are people being abducted, that there are activities occurring on the planet that we desperately wanted to control and put safeguards in place against them, but we were kind of helpless at that point to do that. And that's what this service was about, creating a greater understanding of these things, and learning how we can better understand them and prepare and defend ourselves against these things.
And Michael, if everything that you have been trying to get out of your closet in your mind and the flashback of memories and all of the dozens and dozens of certificates and photographs and DD-214s that you have provided from the Marines and from the Army, you really have the folders and files of a life in the military. And yet, what is the reality of you being able to talk to me on 2 hours of phenomenon radio going to a large audience without some hammer coming down on you from officials?
Linda, I have thought about that. Months and months were spent by me considering those things, because I do have a family. I have dear ones in my life and people that I care about. And I believe, and I remember this as part of the discussions that I had when I was sent back into my 3D life, if you will, here on this earth. I remember being of the understanding that this was something that must happen. I feel, because there has been a form of communication that I have been involved in from the beginning of this a couple years ago. And that comes through my consciousness, and it also comes through other forms that I won't discuss. But I am being encouraged to do this, Linda. I am absolutely being encouraged to do this. There are those that want this to occur, and I feel confident and fairly safe in coming forward to do this. Now, I could find out later how wrong I am, but I truly believe that it is desired that I do this, and that it is a mission that I am obligated to fulfill.
And for all those who are listening, who might have been with Michael Gerloff in 1978 in San Diego in that tunnel filling out papers themselves, and to all others around the world who may have some information or experience along these lines of living parallel lives, somehow being mentally manipulated so that and in time so that you could do 20 years in a secret space program and still have life on Earth. If there's anybody out there who would like to communicate confidentially and anonymously to me, please email earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Always think of a reporter who files news about the Earth. And Michael, give your last few words to those out there listening to you. How could they interact with you if they wanted to reach you?
Oh, I would be most pleased by that, Linda. I want to start by saying this, and this is heartfelt and sincere. And this doesn't go only...
There's only seconds left.
Okay, this doesn't go to just the people that have potentially served in the SSP. This is all my brothers and sisters who are veterans from our military. Look, there are parts of this that were very unpleasant for me. And I'm concerned about how others that have been part of these programs may be dealing with recovering these memories and what that experience is like for them. I want to be part of creating a system where they have somewhere to go to speak to someone that they can look in the eye and go over some of the things that we may have in common. I want to avail myself to that, Linda, and I thank you for throwing that out there.
Thank you. People, email me, and I'll make sure that some of those messages get to Michael Gerloff. And with that, Michael, thank you so much for this fascinating sharing of something that seems both incomprehensible and yet part of a new reality on this planet as we are moving into the 21st century. And we have got to get this planet onto the square, that we're not alone in this universe, and that it is all said to the whole world. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.
I can't believe it's already over. For John Burroughs, my good friend, you're in our hearts and prayers. For Linda Moulton Howe, for our very special guests tonight, and Michael Gerloff here. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you taking the time and spending your Thursday nights here with us, exclusively on KGRA Radio for Phenomenon Radio Live. We'll have another great program all lined up for you next week. Be sure and be here at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on the station that is your contact for the best paranormal UFO talk radio topics on the internet, KGRAradio.com. Have a great night and a great weekend, everybody.